Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
We'll talk highways and infrastructure when Dr. Shawn Wilson, Secretary of the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development, joins us when we return on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Consumers and property owners with construction projects can have a successful result or regretful experiences that could have been avoided. Before any construction project, verify licensure of the contractor and check references. Scammers will claim to be insured or bonded, so always check first. Download our app, LA Contractor, from the Android or Apple Store. Visit our website, lacontractor.org, or contact the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. We're here to help before things go wrong. Hire a licensed contractor. It's the law.
I've been doing business with LBIS for 25 years. They're dependable, trustworthy. It's just the attention to detail with our clients.
Our folks have years and years of experience. They're highly trained professionals, but many companies have that asset. What I'd like to think makes LBIS a bit different is that we use those talents in a way that truly is dedicated to serving the needs of the folks who depend on us.
Promoting workplace safety and family wellness. That's our motto at Gulf Coast Occupational Medicine. The Gulf Coast staff is made up of some of the most knowledgeable and hardest working medical professionals in Louisiana. We care about your safety and your bottom line. With 8 convenient locations in the greater Baton Rouge area, our services include injury management, physical exams, medical surveillance, and substance abuse testing. For more information, visit us on the web at gcombr.info and ride the wave to safety. Passion, experience, safety. These are what set Arkell Constructors apart as a premier general contractor. At Arkell Constructors, our goal is to exceed our clients' expectations, whether it's commercial, industrial, or facility maintenance. We have the team and processes in place to provide a solution for you. To us, every project is a resume for our future. Arkell Constructors, the solution for your next building project.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Dr. Shawn Wilson, Secretary of the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development, joins us. Dr. Wilson, welcome.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. Last time you were on the show, we talked about the role and scope of the Department of Transportation and Development, and you mentioned that surprisingly, most folks aren't aware of all that you are responsible for. Talk about that.
So frozen in the minds of every citizen is what happened in this most recent ice storm that we had, that we closed hundreds of miles of interstate and bridges and roads across the state of Louisiana. It was DOTD that went out and salted the roads and de-iced the roads and reopened the roads a day and a half, 2 days after the worst freeze perhaps in the history of Louisiana. That's just one snapshot. We do the same thing for hurricanes. We do the same thing for tornadoes. Someone has to clean up after it's all said and done, and that's part of what we do at DOTD. In addition to that, we manage 16,000 miles of road, over 3,000 railroad crossings from a safety perspective we work with. We also have maritime responsibilities and port responsibilities and aviation responsibilities. So you tell people roads, railroads, runways, and rivers, and it falls in some capacity under DOTD. Flood risks under DOTD, dam inspection under DOTD. Providing a freight plan for the state to move goods through Louisiana is a part of what we do at Department of Transportation and Development. So we're very comprehensive. I tell people we're the backbone of economic development here in the state of Louisiana. We're working with every agency from the health perspectives to economic development to National Guard. We do a little bit of everything.
I want to talk about your overall budget at the department, but before we do that, you mentioned 16,000 miles or so of highways and roads that you are responsible for.
And 12,000 bridges, by the way.
12,000 bridges.
And I've closed 5 this year.
We've seen that, unfortunately. How does that compare to other states? Because one of the things we hear, obviously, is that in the state of Louisiana, state government takes responsibility for more things, where in other states, local governments have more responsibility. So in terms of the overall responsibility of the State Department of Transportation and Development, how does that compare per capita to maybe our neighboring states?
So, per capita, we have a much larger share of the responsibility in terms of the actual number of roads compared to the resources we get. So, one of the most difficult comparisons is to Texas. They have a gas tax very similar to Louisiana, but they have many, many more roads. But how you manage those roads are quite different in terms of the number of bridges, in terms of the number of people, in terms of the condition that those bridges are in. Totally different. And then you go to Mississippi, another state that has a very similar tax structure as Louisiana. They don't have the same responsibilities for all the rivers and all the airports and things that we have. And in fact, some of their footprint is much smaller, that they may have a larger road system that will not have shoulders or may have a smaller shoulder. And so when you look at the actual footprint of what we have, it's totally different. So it's hard to say an apples to apples comparison. In both of those states, Texas and Mississippi, there are other sources of state revenue that's going toward transportation, and that's not the case here in Louisiana. And then when you think about the fact that we have the 4th largest bridge deck area in the country, that simply means I've got more space that's elevated over water or land than almost every other state in the nation, except 4, or 3 in that matter. So we're totally different. I tell people, the conditions of our structures are totally different, the age of our structure is totally different, and how we manage and operate them are totally different.
We're going to talk a little bit about the backlog that exists and then maybe some of these mega projects that the state also has looked at over time. But let's talk about your budget, including the federal dollars that flow in, Shawn. How much does Louisiana invest in its infrastructure on an annual? We understand clearly that you've got a bigger piece of the pie than most every other state out there, but how much do we invest currently?
I will tell you, over 50% of the money that we invest in infrastructure is coming from our federal state allocation, which comes from our state gas tax and our federal gas tax, mind you. So we spend about $1.2 billion a year on maintaining our state system and operating it. About $700 million of that is actually going into new construction, meaning overlays, rebuilding of bridges, actual contracts that go out the door to our contracting industry that's so very capable of doing the job. It's going out the door to them. And then the balance of that is going to be spent on how do you operate it. Someone has to change signal heads. Someone's got to mow the grass that we're contracting out for the most part. Someone's got to take care of safety and guardrail repairs when you hit a bridge. Not very long ago, you saw an 18-wheeler hanging off of the side of the Mississippi River Bridge here in Baton Rouge. We have to go out and maintain that structure, and there's a cost associated with that. When we have an unexpected bridge closure, there's a cost associated with that. When you have a freeze or a flood, that's not going to be reimbursed by the federal government. I spent $3.6 million in the last freeze here in the state of Louisiana. That's not going to be reimbursed, and that's going to come from that same $1.2 billion. So we have a situation here where we're dividing the pie in much smaller pieces unexpectedly. And as a result, we don't have the same type of program we had 12 years ago. I remember when DOTD was awarding over $1.7 billion in construction contracts alone. We're less than half of that right now, and that means a shrinkage in jobs, it means a shrinkage in infrastructure investment, and it means a shrinkage in terms of what value people get out of the state of Louisiana's infrastructure system.
Most folks may not pay attention to the fact that because our gas tax has not been increased in a significant number of years, that the buying power that gas tax represents today, as you mentioned, significantly lower. We got about a minute and a half left in this segment. So let's talk about the sole funding source for infrastructure and highways in Louisiana, that gas tax, and how long it's been since it has been increased.
So the gas tax was passed in '84 originally, and then again in 1989 and in 1990. And I tell people, if you go back to the salary you were making in 1990, could you buy the house you're in today? Could you drive the car you're driving today? Would you wear the clothes you have on today? And the answer is absolutely not. Everything in construction, from materials to equipment to the manpower to the insurance that you have to pay, everything's increased with inflation except the amount of money that we use to generate the funds to build infrastructure. And that's a problem for us. We're being asked to do today for 7 cents what we spent 16 cents 30 years ago to do. And that equation just does not work. No business would survive on dollars from 30 years ago and still do business today.
We're going to take a break. We've got a lot more to talk about. I want to talk about future plans. I want to talk about some of the announcements that have been recently made about some significant investments and the interesting funding that you're using to do that. We're visiting with Dr. Shawn Wilson. He's the Secretary of the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Since 1919, we've designed and constructed hundreds of industrial plants, roads, ships, dams, and executed some of the most complex jobs in the world. In fact, our quality and dependability are legendary. Today, the legend continues as Brown & Root delivers engineering, construction, maintenance, and industrial specialty services throughout the U.S. and the world from our headquarters here in Louisiana. We are Brown & Root.
For over a quarter century, Kelly's has operated with honesty, integrity, and above all, safety. Kelly's features a fleet of quality equipment operated by dedicated, safety-minded employees skilled in land clearing, above-ground right-of-way maintenance, vegetation control, station yard and manned facility maintenance, above-ground pipeline support, and more. Kelly's Industrial Services, where pipeline right-of-way maintenance gets done right.
What if I said that whatever good things you build you? And that in this economy, sweat never loses its value? What if I said that there isn't a challenge in the world too great for a craft professional with the right tools? And that the steps that lead from where you are to where you want to be can only be built by you? Build your future at byf.org.
Consumers and property owners with construction projects can have a successful result or regretful experiences that could have been avoided. Before any construction project, verify licensure of the contractor and check references. Scammers will claim to be insured or bonded, so always check first. Download our app, LA Contractor, from the Android or Apple Store. Visit our website, lacontractor.org, or contact the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. We're here to help before things go wrong. Hire a licensed contractor. It's the law.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Dr. Shawn Wilson, Secretary of the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development, is our guest. We talked about the buying power of the state gas tax. It is the sole funding source for your department. Other states like Texas and Mississippi have their gas tax, but they also have general fund
vehicle
dollars.
registration fees,
Different
sales
things,
tax on vehicles, a number of special allocations.
So the failure of the tax plan last year, we can't bring that gas tax back up in this regular session, as I understand it, a non-fiscal session. What are you doing at this point to look at alternatives? We're going to talk about these Garvey bonds and these three major projects that you're going to fund a little bit later, but how are you being creative to ensure that we're getting the maximum utilization out of every dollar?
Well, first I'll tell you the failure to even vote on the gas tax was a huge missed opportunity for the state of Louisiana, because everyone agrees that we've got an infrastructure problem. It is the only way that you're going to fund these type of projects and give the citizens the world-class infrastructure system they deserve. So I'm very disappointed that the House did not even give a vote, and it was the only bill that got out of Ways and Means that session in a bipartisan fashion. And all it did was right-size the gas tax. It just brought it up to where inflation would have had it had we done it right the first time. And so we would have lived within the means. None of it would have been used for salary and benefits, and local government would have benefited. Parish bridges would have quadrupled in the state, and we'd have built most of the mega projects in 10 years with that funding. But that did not happen. So as a result, what are we doing? The governor's approach to me was, Shawn, if we are not going to succeed, we won't be accused of not trying. And so we're doing something very different. First thing we're doing is we've issued a RFP, or we're issuing an RFP for a public-private partnership, the first in the state's history to replace the Belle Chase Bridge and Tunnel. It's a $125 million project to replace a tunnel that was built in 1955 and a movable bridge that was built in 1964-65.
I do work in Plaquemines Parish. I travel through
huge,
that tunnel regularly.
and it's
yes.
horrible.
Yeah.
It is not anything representative of the billions of dollars the private sector is investing south of there that you have to drive through a car wash, essentially, to get to your place of employment. So we're doing that for the first time with a public-private partner. But more importantly, we're advocating for Congress to give us a $50 million allocation and what's called an infra grant. We were successful on the I-10 widening. We believe we're going to be successful on this grant as well. It'll be the first time in a long time that we've introduced tolls, and we're going to do it in the way that's smart, in the way that's the industry best practice, and that's by getting the state out of the business of setting those toll rates and run it like a business. Manage it based on what are the real inputs that are going to be necessary, and we're going to do everything we can with our resources to keep tolls as low as possible for as short of a window as possible. But we're not stopping there. We're doing something that's been on the books for over 12 years, and it's using Garvey bonds. And Garvey bonds are a way that you can leverage future federal funds and bond it out to bring it forward to build big infrastructure projects. First question people ask is, why didn't you do it 12 years ago? If you remember, we were spending $1.7 billion a year in construction, and that was very affordable money. It was not bonded, it was one-time money, and it made sense not to do it.
It was a pay-as-you-go.
It was a pay-as-you-go structure.
Yeah, exactly.
Now we can no longer do pay-as-you-go if we're going to build these projects. So the projects we're going to do, 3 big projects. One is down in New Orleans, and it's going to be a new interchange leading to the airport, a $1 billion airport that's only going to have surface street access when it opens in February 19. That's a failure on the state's part to advance that project sooner than later. It's something Governor Edwards asked me to do at the very beginning, was to make this a priority. We've accelerated it in record time, completing our environmental document later this year in about 2 years, and have identified a funding source to build it. That doesn't happen very often in the state of Louisiana. The second project we're going to be doing is Barksdale Air Force Base rear entrance. That's an interchange on I-20 and 220 that's been on the books since we built I-20. Never been done. We've got a 4-star general there now for our cybersecurity for the country. Global command operation over there, and it cannot be accessed except through a surface gate with a railroad track that you have to stop. Unacceptable if we ever want to grow the environment and the economy at Barksdale. That too is a project that was advanced when this administration started in a very big way, and it's funded with this program. And then the last, which I think is the holy grail of frustration and congestion, and that's investing $350 million from the bridge to the split to widen it. The state's tried to do this twice before. This is our third time. The third time, I believe, is a charm. More importantly, we're putting $350 million to build a substantial portion of it. And we say substantial portion because the interstate you're traveling on there now is 60 years old. It was built for a 55 to 60 year life. If we wait any longer, we're going to start to have pieces of that bridge, pieces of that structure come out of service, not because it was planned, but because it has to come out of service, and that's not everywhere you want to be. You want to plan and manage that. So that $650 million bond initiative using Garvey, here's the funny part. It's going to be funded and paid for before the timed bonds that started in 1990. They're going to go to 2045. This will be done in 12 years. Then you have the SHIF bonds, the highway improvement funds. They're going to be bonded out until 2033. This will be done before that. And you're going to have 3 mega projects that, had the gas tax pass, we wouldn't be bonding this money out. We would have funded them.
And it really speaks to the economic development nature of what you do, right? So you think about this $1 billion airport in New Orleans, which is an economic engine in that region, and you're bringing access to
the entire Gulf Coast.
You think about the commerce that happens on Interstate 10 all across Louisiana, and the greatest choke point in all of Interstate 10 from California to Florida is that Mississippi River Bridge in Baton Rouge, and you're going to address that. So these are critically important issues. We got about 30 seconds left here, so let's just talk briefly about your relationship with our congressional delegation, Congressman Garrett Graves, Cedric Richmond, all of the people that you work with.
So we work with all of our delegation as best we can, those who will work with us. Without their participation, we wouldn't have had the Fast Lane grant, and we're depending on all of them to work with us to move the priorities forward for the state. So I'm very grateful for all of our delegation. I speak with them regularly. I just spoke to Congressman Graves today. We have a partnership, and that's what it's going to take, because the roads and the infrastructure is as bipartisan as they come, and it's a part of the Constitution as it was originally written, and we need a federal support to make it happen.
We've got to be willing to fund our priorities priorities adequately and demand excellence from them. That's what you're trying to do. We're visiting with Dr. Shawn Wilson. He's the Secretary of the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development. You're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Passion, experience, safety. These are what set Arkell Constructors apart as a premier general contractor. At Arkell Constructors, our goal is to exceed our clients' expectations, whether it's commercial, industrial, or facility maintenance. We have the team and processes in place to provide a solution for you. To us, every project is a resume for our future. Arkell Constructors, the solution for your next building project.
Since 1919, we've designed and constructed hundreds of industrial plants, roads, ships, dams, and executed some of the most complex jobs in the world. In fact, our quality and dependability are legendary. Today, the legend continues as Brown & Root delivers engineering, construction, maintenance, and industrial specialty services throughout the U.S. and the world from our headquarters here in Louisiana. We are Brown & Root.
It might be one of the most efficient, most effective methods of communications we've ever used.
For more than 25 years, the TJC Group has been helping industry communicate and build relationships with communities, elected officials, and governmental agencies. We are the leading firm in the U.S. for the development, management, and facilitation of industry-based community advisory panels.
Whether you're building a new facility or you manage an existing business, let us put our community and governmental relations experience to work for you.
The TJC Group, facilitating solutions for business and industry.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Secretary of Transportation and Development Shawn Wilson is our guest. President Trump has announced a $1.5 trillion infrastructure plan. Those are huge numbers. It sounds great, about a billions of dollars a year over the next 10 years. But there is a caveat, in that only 20% of that $1.5 billion will be federal dollars. The rest will have to be matched by states, by local governments, through public-private partnerships like you've talked about. What are your thoughts about the overall package? What is Louisiana's plan? And are we going to be able to take full advantage of it given the current fiscal restraints that you're under?
So I will tell you, I'm very excited about the president starting this conversation. I'm even more excited that he took the bold step to ask and suggest that there should be an increase in the federal gas tax. While that's damaging for Louisiana because it makes it harder for us to raise it, he's doing what is the right thing. I am somewhat concerned about our ability to participate in fullness. Now, in his package, he has some very sensible things. One is taking the environmental permitting process from about, on average, 10 years for big projects and getting it down to 2. If you get it down to 5, I consider that a knockout. If you can get it down to 2, that's more than a home run. That's a grand slam. He's also...
Let me say something about that. I just finished reading a fabulous book on the building of the Pentagon. Mm-hmm. From the day that the general in the Army Corps of Engineers had the idea of the Pentagon through design and construction was 17 months. Oh, yeah. And some of these major infrastructure projects
Hoover
can take
Dam's
10
the
years.
Same way.
Right.
The visitor center took longer to build than the Hoover Dam itself. So that's one piece. I like accelerating the permitting process because we want to be common sense oriented and solution driven. The other thing he's doing is he's creating a rural grant program, and his rural grant program is going to constitute about $40 billion, and that's going to be given to states so the governor can prioritize what's important to the state. So if you're in a rural area, that's great. The one challenge we have is we're going to have issues of broadband, we're going to have water, we're going to have utilities, we're going to have sewer, you're going to have roads, railroads, bridges, the whole bit. So it's a broad definition of infrastructure. The two things that concern me most about Louisiana's ability to participate has to do with this larger pot that's about $100 billion, and that's going to require that no entity, no project gets more than 20%. Typically, it's 90-10, 90 fed, 10 state, 80 fed, 20 state. We're not going to be able to participate because we will not have enough to be able to generate the other 80% of that pot. And then the last piece of it is improving loan programs like TIFIA, WIFIA, RIF. Those are all programs that have really good rates and partly similar to the Garvey bond piece. But I'm going to have to pay it back, and I don't have a revenue source to go and borrow more money to pay it back. So we're excited at a national level that this conversation is happening. I'm more disappointed that the state is not positioned, and this isn't the president's problem. This is Louisiana's problem. This is what's happening in the Capitol, is we have to start to fund infrastructure in a way that allows us to take advantage, because if this gas tax passed at the federal level, that's money that we're paying that's going to Texas and going to Mississippi and going to Alabama and not coming to Louisiana, and that's unacceptable.
You mentioned the rural piece of this, and we've got viewers in rural parts of this state, in Alexandria and Lafayette, outside of Lake Charles. And I grew up in central Louisiana, just south of Alexandria. My parents and a lot of my family still live there. Some of the rural highways in those areas are in such poor condition because of our lack of ability to invest that we've got to think about doing something differently. I know you're focused on that.
So we have sections of the interstate that were original pavement from 50 years ago when Eisenhower built it. And I've got rural roads that are original pavement when Huey built them. We've got bridges that are still timber bridges that are 70 years old that fracking trucks might be rolling over. And that's a problem for us, because that fracking truck today might prevent that school bus tomorrow from making that route. And so if we had passed the gas tax, we would have allocated 4 times as much money to rural bridges. We would have created an incentive program to do that. And so between the Highway Improvement Fund, between the Garvey piece, without Garvey, if we don't Garvey bond some of these dollars and build this big infrastructure from a performance standpoint that we have to meet to continue to receive federal funds, I would be spending more money from the rural area in those urban areas. So this is going to smooth it out, if you will, and allow us to continue to invest. The governor traveled the state with Mike Strain, and the number one issue he heard from farmers all across the country, across the state, were rural bridges are a problem, because they've got to move their goods from their farm to the marketplace, and they've got to cross the many bridges that we've been blessed to have.
We've got about a minute and a half left, so I want to ask you 2 things quickly, and one of them is something that I'm really passionate about, and that is the aesthetics of our state.
Absolutely.
Litter, cutting the grass. You are focused on it in a big way, and you've got some things coming up that will bring even more attention to it.
So during Keep America Beautiful Week, or Keep Louisiana Beautiful celebration in a couple of weeks, we're going to dedicate that entire day to litter abatement with the department. We're going to activate as many contracts as we have to pick up litter, and we're going to have as many people as we can out on the streets in particular corridors picking up litter. It's one thing for us to complain about potholes. That's something you can't fix on a daily basis, but keeping that trash in your car is super important until you get to a gas station or your home to throw it away. I tell my Boy Scouts as Scoutmaster, you always have a garbage bag. It's your left pocket and your right pocket. If it's not too icky, pick it up and put it in your pocket, because it may not be perfect, but you could at least keep it clean.
And it's a cultural thing for us too. We've got to pick it up, but we've got to keep it from getting there in the first place.
We've got to keep it from being put down in the first place.
20 seconds, your message to the general public and to the business community about Louisiana's infrastructure.
So infrastructure is economic development. If it doesn't affect your business today, it will tomorrow, from a congestion, from a condition, from a processing standpoint. It's going to be a problem, and if we don't start addressing it, it's going to become more expensive and more difficult. Everything you buy, sell, or trade interfaces with our highway system, and it's important that we protect it and preserve it as the multimodal capital of this country. We've got to get it done.
Every day that we delay, it costs more in the future.
Absolutely.
Secretary Shawn Wilson, always a pleasure, my friend.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.